Hello, everybody, and a welcome to the Game Changers experience with myself, Adam Strong. And we are here on another live show, which I'm super excited. We've got a really interesting guest who I suppose has gone through a bit of a life transformation, if that's what you want to call it. But we've got my good friend, David Waldy, who's going to be with us here on the show, actually. And David's going to be talking a little bit about fierce empathy. And I've never heard of the terminology fierce empathy, but what David is he is a life and business strategist. He's also a coach and a speaker. He's spoken on stages with the likes of Brunsun and Tony Robbins and many other influencers from around the world. But he's also coached thousands of leaders and entrepreneurs from around the world. And, you know, it's going to be interesting because David's going to be sharing his compelling story about his, I suppose, as I mentioned to you, an awakening about, you know, living the American dream. He's going to be talking about the American dream and why it wasn't really much of an American dream. It was more of an American nightmare. So we're going to be talking a little bit about that. We're going to be talking a little bit about what is fierce empathy, and where did the ideology come from. We're going to be talking a little bit about how you can apply the principles of fierce empathy. But I'm going to get David to also walk us through the framework of that. And if you are in a place right now where you feel underfulfilled and you don't feel like, if you feel like you're trying to seek that purpose in life, but haven't quite grasped or understood or haven't quite really taken it on upon yourself to get yourself out of your comfort zone to really challenge yourself. So that's what we're going to be talking a little bit about today. Now, before we get into the gist of things, I always remind everybody here on the show, right? If you are listening to us live, use the hashtag live, use the hashtag replay. We love engagement. And if you have any questions, feel free to use the questions in the question section below. If you're listening to us on LinkedIn and on YouTube, of course, feel free to hit the bell notification in the top right-hand corner. That will be able to get you notified for any event or any announcements as we've got coming up. If you haven't had the opportunity to listen to this live video or recorded video, you can listen to us on the podcast, of course. And we're streaming over on Apple, on Spotify, and Google. And if you enjoy some of our conversations, feel free to leave a 1 or a 5-star review. I always believe in honest reviews. And we'll go from there. Listen, looking forward to today's conversations. So without further ado, Mr. Waldy, how are you?
My brother, Mr. Strong, how are you, man?
I'm good. This is an exciting conversation. I'm really looking forward to it. Happy Monday.
Happy Monday. I'm excited for it too. We're going to dive in and have a blast.
Definitely. You know, interesting. I was reading your bio because you originally grew up in Kansas. Is that right?
That's correct. Right. And for those that don't know where Kansas is, it's the dead center of the United States.
Tumbleweed, I like to call it.
Yes.
Lots of tumbleweeds. So, you know, it's interesting because when we kind of got together and you were talking about fierce empathy, I had no clue what fierce. Obviously, I'd heard of empathy. Well, when we talk about fierce empathy, but I'd love you to kind of give us some context about where you found that kind of, how you created that kind of IP or the ideology of fierce empathy, because you've got a really compelling story, you know, of that you lived what we call the corporate America dream, but you kind of decided that it really wasn't a dream as much. Could you give us some context?
Yeah, absolutely. So fierce empathy, it's a concept, ideology, philosophy, whatever you want to call it, that I kind of stumbled into based on a series of events that transpired. As I'm sure we're all familiar with the concept of empathy. One of the challenges with that is that, especially in the day and age that we live in, and I'd love your thoughts on this too, Adam. It seems like words tend to have whatever meaning individuals decide that they have. There's no universal. It's like, let's look at Merriam-Webster's dictionary and actually see what this word means. And so empathy, obviously, as with many words, it takes on its own meaning because of context and upbringing and, socioeconomic situations, political affiliations, religious affiliations, empathy, depending on how you've experienced it or how the lack thereof. it means a lot of different things to people. What basically, universally, the understanding of empathy is trying to step into someone else's shoes, right? That's kind of the best example we use for empathy. But what I started to discover is that I'm a very, very emotional being. I'm a very emotional dude. I love to cry. I love to laugh. I love to if you need a shoulder, you need a kick in the butt. I love all the feelings, like all the ooey gooey stuff. But it led to a lot of dangers when you are very emotionally in tune with everything that's going on around you. And there's a lot of controversy and arguments about whether that's a nature versus nurture thing. Is this something that's hardwired? Are people just naturally born more empathetic, or is it because they're a product of their circumstances and situations and upbringing? And what I started to do is I started to really study this concept, because I was very frustrated by the fact that as a man, growing up, especially my teenage years, every time I would take like a strengths test or personality test, empathy was right there at the top. And now, as a young man, with the context I had for the word empathy, I was like, that's not a masculine characteristic. Why would I want, like, tenacity or competitive or something, that's a little stronger, right? And I just didn't have a clear understanding of what empathy can be and how it can be utilized in a really powerful way. And so Fierce came out of my own evolutionary process of just development, personal growth, a lot of coaches, mentors, pastors, just different things along the way, where I started to realize that one of the challenges of the day and age we live in, Adam, is that people are very sensitive and empathetic to other people. However, we have lost the art of speaking the hard truth in love. We have become so timid about sharing opinions and expressing differences and having tough conversations and being willing to respectfully disagree with other people, that fierce empathy, kind of an overarching definition, would be this. And again, it means different things to different people, but doing everything within our power to fully see, hear, and understand from another's perspective, while simultaneously holding to our convictions and our beliefs in a flexible way, where we speak the hard truth in love, regardless of whatever discomfort may follow. And so it's a very long definition, a big definition, but basically it's saying, how can I hold space for another individual, do everything to see, hear, and understand from their perspective, while simultaneously having the courage, being fiercely committed to the process of understanding them, and fiercely committed to what I believe to be the truth, and to advocate for that and to fight for that, but to do it in a respectful way, rather than what we see in much of society, which is just cramming it down everybody's throat. You don't agree with me. Cancel culture, all of it. There's a lot of problems that we see and experience. And so that's a general overview of the concept.
I think, it's interesting, because I believe that we live in a very judgmental world now, and I think, I suppose in a way it could kind of, when you kind of mix social media and judgmental opinions and what your thoughts and what your perception or reality of what is the truth and what isn't, and I think that sometimes that can really sedate how we use empathy as a skill, because it is a skill, right? It's very much a skill. But being able to use it as a strength more than anything else. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, the hard part about empathy is that it really is almost impossible outside of a relationship of trust and intimacy. So we live in a world where we feel, we believe, or we think that we can empathize with someone that is in a completely different culture, completely different environment, completely different upbringing. Everything about their life is completely different than ours, which means by extension, there's such a gap, a distance between our reality and their reality, that the mistake we make in trying to be empathetic is that we are, and I'll talk about the flip side of this in a second, the mistake that we're making is that we don't really have a frame to understand from their perspective. And so we're making all these judgments and conclusions and voicing opinions about what people want and what people need and what success is and what business should look like and how people should operate and how people should interact. And the problem is that the deep connection that we long for, not only in business, but just in relationships and with other people. The only way that we can truly understand and where someone can feel seen, heard, and understood is in the context of an actual relationship, which means that there has to be a foundation of trust. And so you overlay that on culture and society, where everyone's got an opinion about everything. And everything that gets traction online is based on polarization, right? You've got black versus white, you've got left versus right, you've got certain religion against certain religion, you got pro-choice versus pro-life, you got LGBTQ versus all the different people that have different beliefs of how life is supposed to operate. And now I have my beliefs, Adam, you have your beliefs, but I feel like the only way that we can move forward, not just as a human race, is recognizing that these problems are not going to be solved top down. These problems are going to be solved around the dinner table, at the coffee house. You had a beautiful dinner I saw the other night, Adam, with a group of incredible entrepreneurs. I was jealous I couldn't be there. I got to see a picture of that is where trust and relationship is established. And I believe that if we can get back to a place where we know who we are, we know what we believe, but we're also doing our best to understand from others' perspectives. That is how we solve so many of the problems that are being faced today, because social media creates such distance that you're looking through a telescope. You're seeing a picture that's so far away and drawing all these judgments and all these conclusions, and it's thin ice. At the least.
I agree with you. I mean, listen, it's interesting. There's a lot of things that I kind of resonate with what you're saying, and you talked about relationships and trust, and you go back to the dinner that I arranged a couple of weeks ago in London. The philosophy behind that is all about how can I really create deep connection on a whole new level, because and also it's based on energy. I'm a big thing in energy, right? So, online stuff is great, right? So, that's all gravy, but really kind of meeting people face to face, intuitively, you can pick up people's energy. You can really get to know someone. Do you know what I mean?
I agree 100%.
So that's cool. Love that. Interesting enough, and I want to there was something that I picked up from what you said, which is all around self-awareness. And I'm big into self-awareness. Like, I'll be honest with you, like, I don't know. I didn't feel like self-awareness was as important, but I feel like now, if we don't know what our parameters are, our belief systems, and our how we effectively, how we're aware of who we are today and whatever it might be. How, from your perspective, and I'm sure that you work with clients in the past where their, self-awareness is not, it needs improvement. Do you know what I mean? Like, because that's kind of where it really starts with, doesn't it? How do you, when you see people that need a heightened state of awareness, what do you do to help make people more aware of not just strengths and weaknesses, but in terms of like skills, life learning skills, in order to make people better, if you like?
Yeah. So the first question that I always like to tackle is that most people are asking a series of questions. And I think you actually might have posted about this the other day too. Forgive me if I'm forgetting incorrectly, but we talk a lot about if you want to create different results, you want to create better results, you have to ask better questions. And we live in a day and an age where, we're not, a lot of times we think we're asking the right questions, and we've been conditioned to believe that they're the right questions. But when you start to dig into this process of questioning who you are and what you're about and what you believe and what you want and what all of these different things, you start to realize that there are useful questions and there are questions that are not so useful. And so one of the not so useful questions that I have found has derailed many people along their journey, or it's caused a lot of unnecessary suffering and difficulty and challenge, is many of us were conditioned to ask the question, what do you want to do with your life? What are you doing? Like, what do you do for work? What do you do? That's the most common. You meet somebody like, oh, so what do you do? Right? What do you do? And like going back to even our childhood, I'm sure many can relate to this, is like, what do you want to do when you grow up? Right. Or to some degree, some people be like, what do you want to be when you grow up? But usually when we say, what do you want to be when you grow up? That was a label that we had. I want to be an ice cream man, or I want to be a doctor, or I want to be the president, or I want to be whatever. Right. But the problem with that, and asking the subset of questions that come with that, when we start to face challenges and difficulties in life, we default to that. What do I need to do? What do I need to do to fix my business? What do I need to do to fix my health? What do I need to do to deal with my boss? What do I need to do with this frustrating employee? What do I need to do with this contract? What do I need to do? And again, it's not that that's not a bad question, but from my perspective, the best first question to ask is, who do I want to become? And when we stop and we come into this place where we actually take a step back and we say, wow, I don't know that I've ever actually defined that for myself. What's really interesting is when you start to define it for yourself and you get crystal clear on who you want to be as a father or a mother, as a husband or a wife, as a leader, as an entrepreneur, as a friend, in your health, in your relationships, in your financial situation, when you get crystal clear on who you want to become, what you need to do gets crystal clear. And that's where the awareness comes in, is that most people, they're feeling either anxious or worried about life, frustrated, overwhelmed. And they're like, I feel stuck. I don't know what to do. Life doesn't have any passion. I don't feel any purpose or any of these things. And the awareness where I like to start with people is again, asking that question, who do I want to become? And interestingly enough, you'll ask people that, and most people can't answer it, Adam. Most people have no idea. And even if you ask people what they want, they can't really tell you what they want. They can tell you everything they don't want, everything that's wrong with their life, everything that frustrates them. But when you ask people what they really want out of life and who they want to become, you start to see the cracks form. And we all have these, right?
Yep.
Because you start to realize that all of this becomes a house of cards, because you're just adapting to whatever gets thrown. You're reacting to life. You've become what your parents said was going to be best. You went to school and got the job and did the thing and married the girl and had the white picket fence and right? But if we're going to address this thing around self-esteem and self-awareness, we have to go to the foundation and say, okay, in order for me to make changes, I need to have an honest time of introspection and saying, here's the reality of where I am. Here are all the things that I am satisfied with and all the things I'm dissatisfied with. And when we look at all the things that we are satisfied with and dissatisfied with, what that awareness, now we have it on paper, on purpose in front of us, we can say, okay, what needs to change in me? And it's usually one of two things, Adam. How I see it is, what needs to die in me? What do I need to put to death? While simultaneously, what needs to be resurrected? What have I let life push down? Baggage and trauma and pain and betrayal and heartbreak and all these things. What has been shoved down deep inside of me that needs to be reborn, that needs to come back to life? While simultaneously, what do I need to let go of? What identity and labels need to die and be beyond, pushed back? Because when you do that, you become aware of where you are. And that's the foundation. If you're looking at a map and you know where you want to go, this is the place that I want to go. And you're talking about an old-fashioned map. If you don't know where you are on that map, it is worthless. It is completely worthless. Right. Now, I'm not talking about like the Apple maps now, that automatic geo-targeting or whatever, but like an old-fashioned map. If you know where you want to go and who you want to become and what you want to do, the only way that you can ever get there is if you stop and assess, here's where I am right now. I need to become aware of my reality right now.
I like that. That's a really good point, actually. There's a lot of it doesn't matter if you're an entrepreneur, if you're in corporate America, it doesn't really matter. And it's interesting. You've probably got old school friends. Same for me. You got that have been in jobs for like 15, 20 years. They're in the same place. They haven't really grown.
Yeah.
But they have this, I don't know. is it a mindset restriction or a blockage? I don't know, but it's kind of like, oh, but I've got a wife. Oh, but I've got kids. Oh, but I've got a mortgage. Oh, but I've got a car to pay payments on, and etc. It's kind of like making excuses. Do you know what I'm saying? It's like they're making excuses, but they know that there's a that deep down they're terribly unhappy, and there's this massive disconnect.
Yeah.
If there are, I mean, I know that there are going to be listeners that are listening in that we're going to probably be touching on a few pain points for you guys. Do you have any advice for those types of people that that are, in your case, you already felt the warning signs. You're 50 pounds overweight, you're working 60, 80 hours a week and that kind of stuff. Like, what do you say to people in that scenario? Like, how do you kind of break the mold? Because effectively, it's like, it's effectively a mold, isn't it? It's like, it's like Groundhog Day. You ever seen that movie with Bill Murray, Groundhog Day? It's the same shit, different day type of analogy. Which is kind of, it's a great movie, by the way. How do you kind of break that mold?
So the first thing, I'll approach it from two different angles. The first is if you are friends with someone like this. I have a lot of people that are in my circle or in my network that I've had to love from a distance for a very long time. I used to be very intimately connected with them, like very close friends. And I've had to kind of step back. And so the first thing I'll talk about real quick is if you are surrounded by people that are not currently focused on dreams, goals, pursuing mission, vision, making the world a better place, inspiration, personal growth, personal development, working on themselves, my friend, for anyone listening, please audit your friend circle. You need to get into the rooms with people that push you past your comfort zone. That is the only way that you will ever transcend outside of your current circumstances. And that all starts with what is influencing you, what you're allowing, the conversations, the thoughts, the books that you're reading, the shows that you're watching, the programs you're listening to, the podcasts that you're subscribed to, all of these things. And so what ends up happening is that you seem to have this one individual that kind of rises above, right? Just a little bit. But that network is constantly trying to suck you back in to the status quo. It's like you said, the mortgage, I got the job, I got I'm working, making $40,000, $50,000, $60,000. And there's nothing wrong with making that amount of money. I need a quick clarifier here. Every person defines success differently. We know this. You could line up 10,000 people and every one of them would have a different definition of success, but we all define failure the same. And failure is our inability to reach our goals. It comes from a great book by Og Mandino called The Greatest Salesman in the World. And when he talks about this, the importance here for your question is that if you're going to rise above, you have to recognize a few things. You removing yourself from that situation does not make you superior or better in any way, shape, or form. You are not an intrinsically superior human being. This is where classes for thousands of years have created major problems. We still have the many of those problems today, but you have to see it as a responsibility while being able to steward and carry all of the pressure and weight that is going to come from people trying to pull you back down, because they're not going to understand. They're going to label you. They're going to judge you. They're going to say things about you. You have to carry humility and love and compassion, looking at them saying, I know I can't convince you of this, but my hope is that through my life well lived, it will demonstrate to you what's possible. And one day, I will be able to help you remove yourself from this situation as well. I'm not better than you. I don't think I'm smarter than you. I'm not or prettier than you or whatever. And so you have to have a servant's heart first and foremost. If you're surrounded by people, know that it's going to be hard to get out of that, get in the right rooms. But then if you're the individual and you've been you're there right now, you're the person who is just waking up, going through the motions every single day. You should be going to the gym, but you snooze, you make it to work and you coast by and you punch in and punch out. And life just is like, what the heck? Why am I here? What am I doing? What is this all about? I'm supposed to be happy, but I'm freaking anxious and I'm worried and maybe depressed. Maybe you're dealing with a lot of things. I dealt with those for years. Suicidal ideation, constant anxiety, panic attacks, all these things. And what was hard, Adam, is from the outside looking in, and this is the danger. And for anyone listening, from the outside looking in, we are really good at wearing masks. We are really good at pretending that everything is okay. We're really good at the smiles, and especially with social media, we put out our best, right? But you know in your heart of hearts if you're not okay. And if you're not okay, there are 3 things that I would recommend. Number 1, you absolutely have to come to terms with, as we mentioned before, your current reality, which means you're going to have to get brutally honest with yourself about the areas that you're dissatisfied, that you're frustrated. A very simple exercise that I love to use with clients is you make, just get a piece of paper, and on the left-hand side of the page, write out every single, like everything that you are dissatisfied with in your life, from your body to your relationships, to your financial situation, to your job, to your, all of it. You write those things out. Then on the right-hand side, you write the opposite, or what you would want instead. And what's interesting, Adam, is I'm sure you know, this is really hard for people. It's really hard to write what they want to say, because people come up with all these reasons. Well, I'm not allowed to do that. I don't deserve that. It's like, I'm not worthy of those things, or only the top 1% get that, or only people that were born into privilege, or this, that, or the other. And there's so many different things that we could throw at it. And I'm not saying that not all of those are true. Some of them are to some degree. However, when it comes to creating change in our lives, when you get crystal clear on what you're aiming at, suddenly all of life starts to move in motion, helping you to create those things. But the only way that that works is if you're focused on what needs to change. Because then when you know what needs to change, you can start implementing and learning new skills, finding out, okay, what classes do I need to take? What books do I need to read? What associations do I need to change? What, internships or opportunities, or, what stages do I need to be on? What conferences do I need to go to, et cetera. And so starting out with where you're at. But then number 2 is you need to get, if you don't have people in your network, you need to do whatever you can within your power to pay for access to the things that you want. I know this sounds counterintuitive, but whether it's coaching or mentorship or conferences, or getting into the right rooms, or a association, going to, like, sign up for Adam's next dinner, go sit because what happens is that your perception collides, your perception of reality collides with another person's. And then you suddenly see how the way you thought the world worked is not the way the world works for everyone. And to pull yourself out of this state requires the 3rd part, which I think is the most important, is you have to recognize that the only way that your external reality changes is if you change. Every single thing that is around you is a mirror. Life is simply reflecting back to us the things that we carry deep inside. And so if you're someone that has negative self-talk and low self-esteem and no confidence, and a lot of guilt and shame and trauma and baggage and all these things, and you've not really come to terms with letting those things go, or even working through them, therapy and things like that, process in a healthy way, you will continue to create over and over and over again the exact same results. And you'll be frustrated because you're going to look at everything around you and say, if I could just fix my wife, if I could just fix my job, if I could just have $1 million, if I could just buy this thing, if I could just. And people live that way. And they never understand that the only way the external around you changes is you have to change from within, because as you change from within, the way you see the world changes. And the way that you see the world, as that changes, you start to realize that you are literally experiencing nothing more than the thoughts and stories you make up in your head.
Love that. Love that. It's so true. For you guys that are listening in, by the way, I hope that you're enjoying some of our conversations. If you are listening to our live, use the hashtag live, use the hashtag replay. And for you guys that are listening in on the podcast, of course, hope that you guys are enjoying some of the conversations between me and David. Interestingly enough, and this is something that I want to pick up, and you talked a lot about at the very beginning, you talked about, surrounding yourself with the 5 most common people you hang around with, right? So and I'm a big believer, you're a big believer that, effectively, I don't know. what was it? A big believer that if you say you're in this job, or say you're running your own business, but you're not fulfilled and you're not happy, is that the reason why a lot of people can't let go is not necessarily because they don't want to, but there is a sense of loyalty to those individuals because they've been there for, I don't know, they could be a childhood friend, for example. But then on the other spin to that is, if we want to evolve as human beings, if we want to evolve as leaders and great entrepreneurs, then how does one evolve? Like, how does one change? So I guess my question to you is, what's the best advice for someone but I don't want to leave these people. I have a loyalty that they've been with me through, like, the storm, through my divorce or whatever it is. They were there for me, but I can see that there's a disconnect. Like, what do you do with that?
It's a great question. So fierce empathy is where you can step in this type of situation, is that there's a lot of different applications with this concept. If you were to step into their shoes, so this person, like, for example, so say you're like, I don't want to sabotage our relationship because, these people have been so loyal to me. If you flip the script and you were looking at them and they came to you and said, Adam, I'll use for example, they come to you and say, Adam, brother, I feel this thing just burning inside of me for more. Like, that I'm supposed to go do these things. I'm supposed to pursue these things. I don't know how. I don't know what the timeline is, but there's just something inside of me. I can't stay in this position. I have to make a change. I have to get uncomfortable. I have to be willing to take a risk. But one of my fears is this. And you get vulnerable. And they say to you, Adam, my fear is that, because of how loyal you've been and everything, my fear is that I'm going to end up staying here and not actually fulfilling the things that I believe I'm supposed to be fulfilling. And it's because I'm so concerned with our relationship and I'm terrified of fracturing that relationship. Now, Adam, I have a feeling that you would look at me like, oh my gosh, are you kidding me? I'll love you forever. I'm your biggest fan. Like, if you feel like this is what you're supposed to go do, I'll support you. Like, I'll champion you. But that's where intimacy and relationship, and why relationships are so incredibly important. If you've not facilitated that kind of depth and trust where you can be vulnerable with people, people are going to make up all these stories. And we're like, oh yeah, well, screw them. They just, like, all my loyalty 20 years down the drain, they're just going to go on and live their life. What about, like, thanks a lot. Right. But when we communicate and when we express those fears and those concerns and we take a risk, right? It's risky being vulnerable. We're opening ourselves. What we often find is that, like, people believe in us and people want us to win. And if we're willing to be vulnerable and say what we want, like, really say, I want to do this, but my concern is our relationship. If that person is truly a friend, they are going to advocate for you. Now, they might have some tough questions, which is fair, right? They might, that's where the hard truth in love, be like, hey, have you thought about this? Have you thought about this? Have you thought about this? Right? Those are true friendships. Those ones that love us enough to tell us what we don't want to hear, but we know their heart. We know their heart is because they want us to win and succeed. And they're willing to offend us or trigger us or push our buttons simply because we know, and they know that there's safety here. And the relationship is something that can continue on. It's just going to evolve and look different.
It's really interesting. I want to share a quick conversation I had with a guy that was at my dinner a couple of weeks ago. We had a similar conversation to what we're having right now. And he's Canadian. So he's been living in the UK for, I think he was like 25, 30 years. Anyway, cut long story short, once a year he goes back home, back to Vancouver, right? And, does the old family thing, friends thing, or whatever it is, right? There's this one particular guy, and he was speaking to me about it. It's one particular guy who's like, he's been friends since he was the age of 6, right? So long time, right? He's in his 50s now, right? So long time. Anyway, cut long story short, like, the guy that came along to the dinner and whatever it is, like, he's at the top of his game. true entrepreneur, multiple he's an award-winning author, and he invests in companies, so he's at the top of the food chain effectively. But his friend on the other hand hasn't really moved along at all for the last 30-40 years, right? And he said to me, he was like, I meet him because I have this kind of like, I know that I can't help him, but he can't help me either. And it's like a dead-end relationship, right? It just goes along because the other guy actually enjoys his company, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they don't see each other that often, maybe once a year. But again, it kind of goes back to that loyalty piece. Like, it's a bit like this is maybe I haven't. I was going to say I haven't fully experienced it myself, but it's a bit like when say your son or daughter ready to leave the nest and you have to let them go, and you don't want them to let them go, right? Or they found their first boyfriend or girlfriend, right? Or they are going to college or university, right? It's like you're kind of torn between, I don't want to let them go. No, I don't want them. Oh, no, I want to live their life. No, I don't want to live that. Do you know what I mean? It's kind of like the same feeling, exactly the same feeling. I mean, what's your take on this?
Yeah. So, I mean, from a psychological perspective, it can be broken down into a number of different scenarios. You've got, attachment styles, you've got codependency, you've got all sorts of people pleasing and the fear of being misunderstood. A lot of these trauma induced or pain induced reactions that many people grow up with and they start to develop. And so it can be challenging when you have a deep relationship, and then, like, say you take the kid example, right? And the kid's going to grow up and go on their way. What you start to find is that when you have, and again, I've got 3 kids. I haven't had to send any off. I've got younger ones, and I can't speak from experience, but what I can speak to is the experience of walking alongside many people who have gone through this. And what you find are the ones that are the most successful in letting go and being able to celebrate and champion are the ones that actually have some form, like they have a healthy relationship, meaning that they love that person. And yes, it hurts to see them go, but there is no form of control or manipulation in the relationship. Right. Control and manipulation oftentimes happens when we don't even realize it. You see this, borderline narcissistic parents. There's a lot of people that talk about this nowadays, and mental and emotional abuse and things like that. Right. And I think that, for many people we go too far. But I will say that it's understandable when you look at relationships through this lens, you start to see fierce empathy again. Is that what would it look like? How would you want to be treated? It's like, goes back to the golden rule even, is like, how would you want to be treated? If you're the person who's having to leave, is going to, like, you're going to pursue this thing, how would you want your parents to receive that? How would you want your friends to receive that? How would you want them to interact with you? And when you do that, it empowers you with that awareness that we're talking about, of saying, as much as my feelings want to hold on to this and grab a hold and hold it with a tight grip, we start to realize that we're trying to control so many things that we were never meant to control. And we're failing to control the only thing that we can control. And the only thing that we can control is our reactions to life. And our reactions to life, a lot of times they're things that we're not even aware of until we're aware of them. And then we can stop and say, okay, instead of reacting, default, triggered, offended, upset, frustrated, resentful, whatever, this isn't useful. I need to pause, check in with myself, and choose to respond instead of default react. Because when I can respond intentionally, because I've stepped into fierce empathy and I've said, man, how would I want to be treated in this situation? That's one side of it. But also, like, what's the best way to support this person and to love this person? You stop getting your hands in everybody else's freaking business.
It's so funny. Or drama, right? We don't do. Me and drama. No, we're definitely not a match made in heaven. I don't do drama. I don't know about you, but we have enough drama in our own life. So,
Agreed. Agreed.
anyway, I know you've created, call it a framework and stuff, and around the whole kind of transformation, because I know that there are going to be listeners where, okay, so maybe I'm convinced that you're onto something here, Adam and David, right? It's like, okay, maybe I do need to change things. Maybe I need to spice things up, whatever that looks like. But from your perspective, what would you say are the four pillars of transformation, and how do you apply those principles, directly, so that we can move forward in life?
Yeah, so when it comes to transformation, the first thing that we have to really come to terms with, as we talked about a little bit before, is you've got to get crystal clear on who you are and what you want and what is necessary to get where you want to go. And so, in
Right.
simplest terms, if you don't have a clear, if you're feeling stuck, right? A lot of times people look at clarity and they're like, I'm clear on where I want to go. This is what I want to do, and I found my calling, or I found my purpose. And then you have everyone else on the outsides being like, well, I have yet to find my purpose. I haven't found my calling in life. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I'm unclear. I feel stuck. I feel frustrated. I feel overwhelmed. But the interesting thing here, and Adam, I'm going to ask you a couple of quick questions. What is the purpose of taking a shower, Adam?
Bathe. To smell nice.
What is the purpose of driving a car?
To get you from A to B.
Okay, what's the purpose of putting on clothes?
To stay warm.
What's interesting is that we've for some reason, and this is how I see purpose, and it's been incredibly useful in my life and the lives of the people I've been blessed to serve, is that in most contexts, purpose is nothing more than an action that must be taken to get a specific result.
Right.
So the purpose of driving the car, the purpose of eating food, the purpose of putting on clothes, the purpose of kissing our spouse, the purpose of making the sales call is because we're trying to get a specific result. Mm-hmm. And so if we overlay that in life, it answers the question very easily for most people. It's like, what is your purpose in life? Well, it's got to be defined by you. If you give yourself permission to define who you want to become, what you want, why you want it, and what skills, what associations, what things you need in order to get there, clarity starts to come into your world, and you start to actually create purpose and meaning in every single thing that you do. And so people are always like, I want to live a purpose-filled life. And then on one hand they say that, and then they're like, yeah, but I don't know what my purpose is. I'm like, then give yourself a freaking purpose, like define one. But, I say that kind of tongue in cheek, because the honest truth I've found, Adam, over the years is that most people have a really hard time giving themselves permission to do that, especially people with a religious background. It's like, no, that's God's job. Like, or whatever you believe. God's job is to tell me why I'm here, and I'm supposed to find his purpose or calling for my life. And you end up having people who spend their entire life trying to figure out what their purpose is, and they die, and they never actually used any of the skills or the things that were birthed inside of them. And so number one is again, clarity. So for anyone that wants to write down is clarity, is that you've got to get crystal clear on these things. Because when you do, what you need to do starts to get clear. Yep. But that's what leads into step number two. And step number two is what I call constructs. And constructs, if you think about construction, imagine when you're born, if anyone can think about Legos, right? You're given this tub of Legos and you're born, and it's just poured out all on the floor. There's no legend. There's no map. There's no like, here's what you're building. It says, just have fun and start putting stuff together. And we start putting stuff together, and we're learning from our parents and our teachers and everything. We're constructing this identity, right? Mm-hmm. We're constructing our belief system. We're developing our emotional intelligence. We're starting to see and think about the world in a certain way. And so we construct this image of ourselves. And what's interesting is that along the way, you start to see how other people are constructing their life. They have their own Lego sets, and you're like, oh, you put that piece there, and there's this. Oh, that's cool. I want that. And then what we end up doing is we start looking around at everybody else, and we start to construct our life to try and make it look like theirs. And this leads to the situation we were talking about before, Adam, is before you know it, the 5 people that are around you, you look at what you've constructed and what they've constructed, and they all look very similar. You're like, wait, why am I the average of every, like I pulled these pieces, right? Is because we construct, right, this identity based on, so many factors growing up, et cetera, et cetera. But if we are going to actually transform, we have to redefine these things. We have to deconstruct and reconstruct those belief systems, how we process our emotions, the thinking patterns that we have, so that in our mind, which is how we're doing this whole thing through using our mind, we can construct what we want rather than what came by default or by accident or by luck or by privilege or by whatever definition you want to give it. We are today where we are because we have constructed this thing. And a lot of times we forget that there's still a bunch of pieces on the floor. We are free to take pieces off and put pieces on. And so if you start to create an image of who you want to become and what you want, and you can fix that in your mind, you're like, hey, this doesn't quite look like this, the idea that I have. So what do I need to take off? And what do I need to add? And how can I do that consistently to make it look more and more and more like this? So that's number 2. Number 1, clarity. Number 2 is constructs. Number 3 is commitments. Commitments is where we just simply start to align all of our actions. So these are our choices, our habits, our boundaries, our routines, our behaviors with the higher standard. What are you actually committed to? In order for you to be able to manifest or create that new reality, you have to become something different than what you are. And you have to change what you're committed to. Are you committed to snoozing? Or are you committed to getting your butt out of bed and going to the gym? Are you committed to eating fast food? Or are you committed to a healthy lifestyle? Are you committed to your spouse or are you not? The interesting thing about commitment is that you can't, like, I love the marriage example. You cannot be 99% committed to your spouse. You're either you're either committed or you're not committed. Yeah. That's it. There's no percentage of commitment. Nope. You have to decide, you have to commit, and you have to become. And this means from a neuroscience perspective, if you're going to change the hardwiring, the encoding of the brain and create new neural pathways, we have to be willing to do things we don't feel like doing, that discomfort, for long enough that we actually create a new neural pathway and we reprogram our minds so that our old habits are overwritten by new habits. And those new things become our second nature. And this is where we really start to see transformation happen, is because I can look at an individual and I can tell you what is a priority to them just by like a 10-minute conversation. I can tell you what really they care about, what they're committed to, what they're holding on to. And so when you can start to see this, you start to realize, like, oh my gosh, I'm much more committed to my comfort than I am to what I feel like is the calling on my life. I'm much more committed to this complacency or whatever it is, right? You can choose your vice. I'm more committed to whatever the thing is, rather than saying, I'm going to do what I don't feel like doing, right? Like going to the gym with consistency until it becomes an actual new habit. That's when you know your identity has changed. Right. And there's a couple of great books on that. The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg is a great one, but then Atomic Habits by James Clear, I think it is a solid one as well. Cool. But clarity, constructs, commitments, reassessing those things. When you start to choose to act and be different, the science has now proven it takes between 21 and 90 days to rewire your brain. But that only works if you're coupling it with self-care and rest. Otherwise, all of your effort and energy, and we see this, Adam, all the time, all these people that are hustling and grinding and doing all the stuff and, just burning the midnight oil. The problem with that is that the science has now proven it takes up to 1.5 years to rewire your brain if you are not committed to self-care and rest.
Damn.
So if you are serious about changing your life, it's about like going slower and being intentional every single day. That is the fastest way to transform your life. Not going faster, not reading, 8 hours a day, not like having an insane schedule. We see this all the time. Wake up at 4 a.m. and do that. That's actually the slowest way to get where you want to go. those things might be
Muscle club.
useful, but it's
Mm.
assessing those commitments and coming into alignment. And then the last one is consistency, is that you have to dedicate yourself to the practice of discipline, responsibility, and accountability. This is what enables us to actually get to our goals, because we are very emotional beings, all of us, whether you tend to be more emotional or not. And most often we're really good at keeping our word to other people, and we are really good at lying to ourselves. We negotiate with ourselves all the time. And we say, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. And I'm going to stop eating that. And I'm going to stop going there. And I'm going to all talk. Right. And so if we as individuals cannot bring ourselves to keep our word to ourselves, the only way that we can overcome that and bring ourselves to the place where we're transformed and we can be self-accountable is you have to bring accountability into your life. You have to bring someone like Adam into your life, right? That's what I do as well. You bring them into your life and you say, hey, this is the standard. I give you permission to hold me accountable to this standard. And if I fall below this, I'm going to either need you to give me a hug and remind me who I am or kick me in the ass. One of the two. That's where I need you in my life. And I'm giving you permission to hold me accountable to this standard. And the only way that this works is with that permission. Without it, right, we can't actually help people get the results, because I can't go around and try and tell everybody what to do. It's like,
True.
it doesn't work, right? And so with all of those things, when you put them together, those are the 4 pillars I found of transformation. When you can get that clarity, you address how you're thinking about yourself and who you're becoming. You commit and you assess all of your choices, your actions, and your behaviors. And then when you stay consistent, when you do that, you literally will be transformed as you renew your mind and you start to see the world through a completely different paradigm.
Absolutely. Love that. Some good stuff. There's some really juicy value bombs that we're getting out of today's show, ladies and gents. So I hope that you're enjoying it. I know that we're coming towards the end of our conversation. I suppose my final question to you really is, I mean, you've been on a bit of a transformational journey yourself, and you continue to evolve and you continue to be the best version of yourself, if that's what you want to call it. But I suppose my final question is like, how do you, where do you see yourself in the next, what is your personal mission? Where do you see yourself in the next 20 years?
It's a great question. So part of the big dream for me, Adam, is that I have a very expansive vision that specifically serves orphans, widows, and single mothers. Part of my desire in entrepreneurship, and there's a few different factors. Number one is I want my team and all the employees that I've ever had, I want them to be the highest paid, the most fulfilled, the most satisfied, loving what they do. And so I want to create businesses that help people create the life that they want, that basically the umbrella of my vision, their vision can be housed underneath that. And I can give them a launching pad and an opportunity to pursue the things inside of their heart. But with the long-term goal, my desire is to completely change and shift how the world is handling, serving and supporting orphans, widows, and single mothers. And I have a pretty expansive international vision for what that's going to look like. My wife and I, we want to create a summer camp as well that is for foster kids in the foster care system and orphans, that they can come and that they can experience, learning how to build a campfire and shooting bow and arrow and taking out a kayak and art classes and writing music and working on poetry and learning to sing and doing drama and not just education type stuff, but really all of those things that many of these kids, they don't get to experience, and bringing them together with other kids that are also in that to create brotherhood and sisterhood relationships. And my heart is to, along the way, to just encourage, inspire, and build up people and to help them become everything that they said that they would be, because I don't believe that life is a zero-sum game. I don't think for anyone to win means that someone else has to lose. And most of us were conditioned to believe that. Well, I can't go after my stuff because if I win, someone else has to lose. And it's a very scarce, short-sighted view of what is available to us on this beautiful planet. And so big vision for me is writing books, sharing my story, speaking to people, encouraging, inspiring, working with entrepreneurs, coaching, consulting, doing all those things. But that's where I'm headed, is to make the world a better place, particularly for orphans, widows, and single mothers.
Love that. It kind of reminds me of Baden-Powell's philosophy when he founded the Cubs and the Scouts. Have you ever read that?
I have not. It sounds like I should.
Definitely, you should definitely. Baden-Powell. I'm sure Baden-Powell was British, but anyway, he was the founder of the Scouts and the Cubs, and it was kind of, but it wasn't really based on helping single mothers and orphans, which could be your USP, I guess, in a way. But it's kind of interesting. But love it. Very cool.
Thank you for sharing. No, I appreciate it.
Cool. Well, listen, guys, hope you've been enjoying today's conversations with me and David. What I was going to say to you guys, if you have been enjoying our conversations, feel free to connect with David on his social media links, and you can be one of the 500,000 subscribers that are following him here on the whether it's on Instagram or LinkedIn, whatever it is. Feel free to reach out to him if you have any questions. Mention the podcast, of course, because he's been on hundreds, if not thousands of podcasts. But this one is obviously the best one, of course.
It's been awesome, bro. The best.
Absolutely. The best. That's why it's called the Game Changers Experience, right? Anyway, David, just want to say thank you so much. You've been been a great guest. I just want to say thanks very much for being on the show today.
Adam, it was an honor. Thank you for having me, brother.
Awesome. Listen, guys, hope you've enjoyed today's show. Feel free to subscribe to us if you are a first listener. Congratulations, and hopefully you'll come back again as well. So from me, David, have a wonderful day, week, month, whenever you listen to this, and we'll see you soon. Take care, and we'll see you soon. Cheers now. Thanks.